My gender is not human. Compiled by Nova. Image description. A large snake coiling around itself. Its scales are the color of the xenogender flag. End image description. Xenogender. A gender that cannot be contained by human understandings of gender. More concerned with crafting other methods of gender categorization and hierarchy, such as those relating to animals, plants, or other creatures/things. Letter from the editors. One of the best parts of the alterhuman community is realizing that you are not alone, that there are others all around the world like you. We kept seeing posts from community members asking if they were the only ones who felt like their gender wasn't human, or like it was affected by their species identity. Yes, there are others, a lot of others. And to prove it, we hosted the Zine. While this project definitely has an xenogender slant, anyone who had something to say about the intersection of their alterhuman identity and gender identity was welcome to submit their work. Remember, you can do what you want forever, and it's your gender. No one else gets to tell you what it is or should be. All artwork used in the Zine, when not provided directly by a contributor, was downloaded from Pixabay and edited by us to have the xenogender flag as an overlay. With the exception of the xenogender flag itself, which was downloaded from the LGBTQIA+ wiki, and our image above, which was commissioned from the amazing RAR. Special shout out to Kaned Okami, who came up with the title for our zine during a brainstorming session. Also, another shout out to Dasky for inspiring the cover by being the one to introduce us to the alterhuman community, which they discovered through their own gender exploration, and which you can read more about in their entry later on. Image description. Profile picture of a golden hydra with 3 heads. They are all grinning with happy enthusiasm. End image description. How did God fuck up a horse and a human at the same time? By Laika Wallace. Image description. Line art drawing of a humanoid horse with their hands pulled in towards their chest. Their legs are an amalgamation of human and those of a rearing horse that disjointedly overlap one another. End image description. Content warning. The following story contains mild body horror. It'll Fuck Up Your Body by Laika Wallace. When Ryan first started getting headaches, he was 3 months on testosterone and tried his best to chalk it up to that. He read all the articles and brochures, had all the conversations with all his doctors. There is a big, real chance that his migraine will get worse despite his medication. He was already one of the lucky people who lived with debilitating headaches and fatigue, so he figured he could just kind of ignore it. This was not the migraine he knew. It felt, and he wasn't one to exaggerate, like something was boring its way out of his skull just behind each temple. But maybe he could learn to ignore this too. By the time he was almost 6 months on testosterone, he spent so much time sleeping that he had to beg his professors to give him extensions on literally everything and could barely make it to most lectures. His doctors, thank goodness, got him on medical leave for a bit so he could rest and recover from whatever was going wrong. He prayed it would pass. Testosterone had been hard fought for since he came out as a trans man in grade 8, and for years everyone he knew had warned him against it, saying it'll fuck up his body, or fuck it up worse than it already was. He'd only managed to get a supportive doctor after moving out last year during his first year of university. He wasn't about to give it up over some fucked up symptoms he dealt with his whole life. It wasn't until he woke up one afternoon to blood on his pillow and in his hair that he panicked. "Jake?" he called frantically for his butch. She came running in from the bathroom, her bright orange undercut plastered against her neck with water, still struggling into her bra. "What's wrong?" "I'm bleeding." "What?" She dropped her towel on the foot of their bed and crawled up beside him, checking the twin wounds, smarting patches of broken skin on his scalp. His thick, dark hair was slicked with blood, but it was bright and not bleeding enough to indicate a serious problem. She was relaying all this as she did her best to wipe up the blood with tissues from the bedside table. "I think I just scratched myself really bad," he mumbled, dazed. "I don't know. It's been itching there for days." Jake just made a sound in her throat, wincing. "What do we do?" "Call your doctor and get you to a hospital." "I don't want to go to the hospital again," he groaned, sliding up into a sitting position. "I'm not sitting in a waiting room for 6 hours to get Advil and a bandage." Jake frowned in concern, hooking her arm around his shoulder, and said, "Okay, well, I'm going to get you some Advil and a bandage, and I'm going to call your doctor." "Thank you," he mumbled, holding his head. The bleeding was stopping, at least. She came back and tenderly bandaged his head, holding him against her large, soft body. For the first time since all these new pains started, he cried. His doctor couldn't see him for a week. He tried to hold it together, but even though the wounds were healing, his head still pounded, and now his whole body itched. He couldn't bathe or even really shower because it made everything hurt worse. His body felt like it was on fire. He'd felt similar itchiness while his leg hair grew in thicker, but this was on another level. The worst thing was he couldn't tell Jake. He knew she'd think he was having an allergic reaction, somehow, to the testosterone, even though the injections didn't make it spike any, and it covered his whole body. The problem is, he couldn't lie to Jake, even if he tried. She'd always been able to see right through him. They'd known each other since before he came out, and had come out as bisexual together in grade 9, and then discovered butchness hand in hand over the next couple years. They'd been through breakups, middle school and high school, Ryan getting into university and Jake getting a job at a salon, and 2 moves each, plus 1 more to their new apartment, which was pretty shitty, but between the 2 of them, it was home. They could go through anything together. They both knew that. But this wasn't normal. This wasn't anything Ryan had predicted could happen to him. Even with the hospital visits that went poorly before he was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, Raynaud's, and a slew of other bullshit. Even with the tense appointments and long waits and invasive tests, he never thought he could be in this amount of bizarre, fucked up, out of left field pain from testosterone, no less, even though he could not admit that even to himself. In a haze of depression, he turned to the internet for answers. All the informational sites he'd already read and were painfully vague and unhelpful. Instead, he found blogs, vlogs, and articles by trans people taking testosterone and talking about their own experiences. By 6 months in, he should be getting sweaty, having some hot flashes still, having a bigger appetite, and being tired all the time. That checked out, mostly. The pain made it hard to eat. He should be noticing that his existing hair is thicker and darker, and new hairs have grown in further up his thighs and on his upper lip. His voice should be cracking, and weight should be shifting away from his thighs and hips to settle on his belly. He should be starting to find it easier to build muscle. Most of that was happening to him too, but it didn't explain the rest. Frustrated, he was going to quit the research entirely when he heard one person's final note on their video. While this is my experience with testosterone so far, it's not going to be the same for every person taking it, T. Your experiences will vary because your body is going to respond to HRT differently. What your body does when you introduce it to testosterone is what it's supposed to do. So don't worry if it's not the same as what I've talked about here. And duh, this isn't a stand-in for medical advice. Your doctor will answer questions for you better than I can. Peace. He tried to tell himself that If this is what his body was supposed to be doing, then maybe it could be fine. As the days dragged on, more new problems appeared. His skin was covered in tiny red abrasions, like ingrown hairs, and he felt a prickly peach fuzz over his whole body. Jake had noticed it too, and insisted he let her wash his painful back, arms, leg, and chest with lukewarm water and the gentlest body butter she could find. She sat him on the side of the tub, her on the toilet, running clean water over his wounds, finding the hairline on his neck further down than she remembered, and bristly. The sore spots on his head became lumps that protruded further, breaking through the skin to show ridged black bone. The tiny hairs all over him, covering every inch of his skin, broke out and darkened to a dark, rich brown, like the hair on his head. "I don't think this is what testosterone was supposed to do, Ryan," she said one day, only 2 days from the appointment date, as she wrung out the hand towel in the sink. From the edge of the tub, Ryan said, "I know." "What do we do?" "Cancel the appointment with my doctor." Jake looked at him for a long time, not saying anything. Ryan knew that this was beyond the scope of normal relationship hiccups. He knew that he was turning into something. He knew it would be reasonable to leave him, to say the least, or take him out back and shoot him like a lame horse. But meeting Jake's eyes, there was no fear. He stood, shaking, and reached out to her. She closed the distance and wrapped her arms around him, stroking the stubbly fur along his wide back, not minding that his dampness stained her shirt. "We're going to be okay," she said softly into his shoulder. "We're going to do this together." He nodded, pressing closer to her. A shaky breath threatened to turn into a sob, but he didn't feel the need to cry. He was going to be okay. He had his butch. Everything would work out somehow. So she canceled the appointment and wrote down everything that had been happening since the headache started, spending hours getting it all down in one day so they could start recording properly immediately. She began recording what Ryan ate, what he did all day, how he slept, how he felt. She measured the growth of his hair, which had begun growing plasticky and pin-like down his neck and onto his shoulders, and the fur that evenly covered the rest of his body. She took special care of the bony nubs on his head, massaging the inflamed skin around them and applying polysporin to make sure it wouldn't get infected. She measured their height and width, counted the ridges as they appeared, cleaned up his blood. When the skin of his feet blackened and hardened overnight, she soaked them in warm water with Epsom salt and tea tree oil. His doctor called, leaving a worried voicemail message. Ryan didn't call back. Jake respected that. Whatever this was, whatever this led to, it was theirs to deal with. They'd think about the future, and doctors, and school, later. One morning, after a couple of weeks of this, Ryan woke up feeling off. He sat up, moving carefully so he didn't wake up Jake, who was sleeping peacefully in a heap of blankets beside him. He breathed easily, and didn't get a dizzying head rush, which was a startling first. He felt heavier physically, but barely noticed it. His body didn't feel like a trap anymore. Peeling the blankets back, he put a foot on the floor and heard a tap, like stone on wood. Jake stirred. "You okay?" "Yeah," he choked out, but not out of fear. Excitement had welled up and spilled over inside him, shaking his body as he scrambled to his feet. Click, click, click. He ran out of the room, each footstep ringing out through the hallway and making him go faster, faster. He skittered against the tiles in the bathroom, almost slipping, but grabbed the counter. Pulling himself up, he looked in the mirror and gasped. The nubs that had broken through his scalp had grown into skinny curved ram horns, arcing over his hair, which, he noticed as he ran his fingers through it, had melted into a glimmery black-brown feathers where it had grown down on his neck and shoulders. The thin fur that covered his body had thickened so his pale skin was invisible through it. And looking down at his feet, which only the night before had been aching, twisted, and swollen, were completely changed. He now had a pair of cloven black hooves. Jake stood in the doorway, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Ryan?" He brought his hands to his face, vision blurred by his hot blush and a huge smile that wouldn't go away. He tried to say something, but nothing would come out. Are you feeling okay?" she asked, hurrying to meet him. She put her hands around his and inspected each new change. The sleek feathers, the sharp horns, the velvet fur. "I am," he said, breathless, leaning into her gentle touch. "I've never felt this good. I can't explain it." She cupped his cheek, running the flat of her thumb along the fur on his cheekbone, wiping away tears of joy. "You don't have to, Ryan. I love you. You really still love all of this?" he squeaked, voice cracking slightly. She nodded. "And I always will." He kissed her, winding his arms around her body, and they both knew that because they were together, everything would be okay. Ethereal by Sunshine Breeze. For when time crunches the mind, for when orders move my body without a thought, for when buzz echoes the office, in the split second of peace, I am there. I am there, so undeniably not who I was, so undeniably not who people saw. For the woman I was, I am not. For the man I wasn't, I am not. In the split second of peace, my mind wanders where time stops, where buzz quiet down. What I am shines. I am there, small and sometimes big. I look dainty and frail, but never truly touchable. I leave a trail of glittery dust in my path as I fly about them with my wings. My power sings in magic. I hover like I'm free. I smile, in reality, and within this realm in mind. I look beautiful, vague, yet stunning. Sun shines perfectly on me. In the midst of the fantastic realm, I look ethereal. I am not a woman, nor man, nor something else within the realm of my humane body. I am the little fairy in that realm, ever beautiful, ever ethereal. I am ethereal. Seabag, Gender by Toby Riverrock. Image description. Listing gently in the boundless ocean. Simple, mindless, free. Written beside a huge humanoid jellyfish floating through an ocean filled with colorful fish. The blue folds of a jellyfish body act as a skirt and cap to an orange and soft humanoid shape with extended, flipper-like arms. Their core is translucent and shows the impressions of ribs and a lighter core. Shining eyes peer down at the viewer from underneath their cap, and long tendrils cascade down around them from their cap and skirt. End image description. Where Gender and Animality Meet by Sony Spiritwood. I periodically get times of trying to figure out what to call my gender and how to explain it well. Of the established terms, demi-female may be the closest one I've found. Recently, I came across the term xenogender and noticed it can be used in relating, for example, animals to gender, and thought that maybe it was close to my experience/identity. But after looking further into it, the term and concept doesn't fit me, as it's more so about symbolic or sensory explanations for gender, or utilizes noun self-genders, which just isn't fitting to me. Another issue I have with using xenogender for myself is that my gender still feels like it is, quote, binary, in the sense of feeling like and identifying as, quote, female. However, it is on a non-human spectrum of gender without being symbolic, more of a literal kind of non-human gender, in contrast to how xenogender tends to be used. The definition, though, seems mostly fitting of my gender if taken in the literal sense, And if it wasn't restricted to non-binary genders, I guess I could be considered adjacent to or overlapping with xenogender. Demi-female still feels not quite right, but is closer than others I've come across so far because I do see myself as partially feminine. Specifically, just feminine leaning. No human masculinity in my identity, and not a blend of feminine and masculine, like androgynous would be. I'm comfortable referring to myself as she/her and female, though I tend to think that what I mean by female for myself is rather different than what is generally meant by human society as female. If anything, I'd call it something like neuter female, but that still doesn't get into the depths of what the hell I am gender-wise. Now granted, maybe I shouldn't even be caring much about a term to fit my gender identity, especially with so many terms and definitions already, and with more being coined as time goes on. I know I don't need a term for it, let alone some perfectly fitting one. However, at least thinking about the terminology and exposing myself to some of these terms helps in my introspection and towards better understanding myself, including in relation to, and in contrast to, other people. It also lets me understand the extent of my personal animality and how it permeates through into so much of who and what I am on a non-physical level. Over time, in part through considering these gender identity terms, I've developed a better concept and understanding of just what gender means to me and how or where I fall along the vast diversity of gender identity. If anything, I kind of like the term feragender, which I came up with only to follow that with a web search and find someone last year had coined it online. Though their definition still kind of fits, just without the specification of wild animal, because I don't see mine as specific to being a wild creature. Sure, fera denotes wild, but honestly, so many other terms I thought of were already coined and weren't fitting. For example, allogender, zoogender. Granted, I don't like the sound or look of that one, just personal preference. Allogender and zoanthogender sounds okay, but too specific sounding, even though this is ultimately meant for me. I'm just weird and like it broader than that. Shrugs. I guess feragender, neuter female, is still about as specific and fitting I have currently. So aside from all this terminology stuff, what even is my gender identity like? Well, from what I've figured out so far, I see myself as female, but not human female, is essentially a different construct and spectrum from that of human specific gender. I, beyond gender, identify as both, intrinsically, human and non-human, humanoid and non-humanoid, and that runs through into my gender. It turns out, I'm not surprised, honestly. At my core, I am a shape-shifting, to a restricted number of forms/creatures, humanoid, who happens to live a mundane human life in a human body. And that pervades into the whole of what is me. My understanding of my gender deals with concepts derived from the sexual, genital, and sex hormone aspects and influences of a creature that doesn't exist. I've realized there's basically a concept my mind identifies as fitting my gender that happens to be based on some kind of shape-shifting humanoid creature, which has therefore previously made extra difficulty in me understanding, let alone explaining and naming, my personal gender. About these humanoid creatures, they still have males, females, and in-between/others in regard to sexes, let alone genders. But they have distinct differences from that of human sexes. They are sexually dimorphic, but only mildly, less than humans. All sexes have minimal body and facial hair. Their hair is mainly on scalp, eyelashes, and eyebrows, with thin, fine, and light-colored hair over the rest of their bodies, including armpits and pubic area. Females have permanent breasts like humans, but their vulva is minor, only a slit or hole. They are more curvaceous, like human females tend to be. Males have no external genitalia, only an external slit or hole as the opening, and have a human-like androgynous appearance to their bodies. They don't have much in the way of femininity or masculinity in the sense of how it is often conceived for humans in general. Actually, I don't know if that's really just an attribute of those creatures or if it's mainly a me thing from seeing myself basically as a neutered, non-human creature/humanoid. In my case, for my gender identity, I would like to be one of those females, although a neutered one. Post-development of secondary sex characteristics. Retaining a sexuality and sex drive based out of pleasure, not for reproduction or from sex hormone influence, and identify as sterile. I also sometimes, when my libido and arousal are strong, experience an erect phantom humanoid penis. I don't have a good concept of its form, but it's without testicles. Though, so far, I don't consider that part of my gender identity. I feel it is just something strange I experience for whatever reason. Though perhaps it's a humanoid internal penis that I only feel when it is erect and, quote, unsheathed in an external position. I really don't know yet. Also, at times, I have the desire to do binding of my breasts, though I've never journeyed into actually trying it. Including feeling sometimes, not always, more aesthetic and sensory-based satisfaction when my breasts feel relatively flatter due to wearing certain kinds of shirts. So I feel like I primarily identify as a female gender of that strange humanoid species, while also less often feel myself fluctuate towards the male, more androgynous and not masculine, part of the species spectrum. It's all very strange, having a non-human gender, so to speak, and I haven't yet found someone who experienced this sort of thing. But then again, it's a difficult thing to figure out. It has taken me several years to nail down this much. It's outside the human normal spectrum of gender and sex, and it's probably something that is relatively few people experience. It'd be tricky to transition to feel more comfortable with myself and body, but I've taken some steps. I did get sterilized a few years ago, so that's at least something closer to the whole neutered aspect. To be fully neutered, I'd have to have my ovaries and uterus removed, and that would have its own set of health issues following it, and I keep my legs and armpits shaved close most of the time. To me, it's not a female-specific thing, as I noted above regarding the appearance of that humanoid species. I haven't worn makeup in a long time. Lack of motivation is part of the reason. I'm content with my face looking how it does, sans things like plucking my eyebrows or reducing my acne. But I will note that initially in high school when I started wearing makeup, it was largely inspired by men wearing similar styles of makeup that I went with, as also the same men influencing my hairstyles back then sometimes. I see makeup as a gender-neutral thing, even if it isn't treated that way in a lot of our societies. Beyond that, I'll never have my genitals transition to be like I feel they should be. While I'm at it, I'll throw some in here about my sexuality. For years, I identified as gray asexual, more specifically now as demisexual, which I feel is fitting enough for me, along with polysexual, though confirming the polysexuality is tricky given that I'm demisexual and have only been sexually attracted to, I think, 2 people in my life, one a trans man and the other a trans woman. When I'm outside of one of those romantic relationships, and before I developed a genuine romantic attraction to either person, I have been devoid of sexual attraction and even lacking a sex drive. For the past several years, I've been in a stable romantic relationship, and it started off with some level of sexual attraction. Already romantically attracted to this person and been with them previous times. It may be a low to moderate sex drive, but for the past few years, the sexual attraction and especially sex drive have been high. Personally, I think it relates to my chronic depression as some fucked up way to balance out the fact that around the same time as the sex drive went up, my ability to feel pleasure during sex dropped. Sexual anhedonia. And so did my ability to orgasm. So it feels weird to be a demisexual person with such a high libido and high sexual attraction, I'll bet all directed at either one human person or, alternatively, fictional humanoid creatures, and on top of that, being anorgasmic and having sexual anhedonia. My body and mind are just odd when it comes to this stuff. Addendum, my gender. Upon further, gradual reflection on and off for months, I've come to understand more about my gender. More accurately, the concept I align my gender with is the same as what I had previously written in my Where Gender and Animality Meet essay, but my understanding of it as non-human has changed. It's kind of confusing in that it's sort of a liminal concept between human and non-human, given that it doesn't align with any known human/hominid or primate that I'm aware of, even though it most closely resembles Homo sapiens, so hence my confusion in labeling it previously. I've taken to now terming it parathorogender, or basically a gender that is near and beyond human, but not actually human as we know it, i.e. homogeneous or other real hominid. My description given in that previous writing still stands, but I've come to realize this concept is essentially my, quote, ideal version of humans, what my mind idealistically conceives humans, including myself, should physically and sexually be like. All body hair is short, fine, and lighter in appearance. Facial hair is the same, and never long or thick, like masculine aged sapiens. Facial hair and even eyebrows are thin to moderate in thickness. Males are androgynous looking and have internal genitals with only a thin slit or hole, urogenital opening, as females also have the same external appearance to their urogenital opening, with vulva being vastly reduced compared to aged sapiens. There are also other sexes/intersex individuals, though externally their differences are less obvious than in aged sapiens. Females do have breasts, but they generally don't get particularly large. Probably not bigger than a C cup. I do wonder sometimes if this concept has any relation to my blood pure kin type, but I haven't reached a more definitive answer on that yet. However, at least the genital part might relate to 3 of my therotypes: cat, mongoose, and theropod, probably mostly cat, in that they have internal genitals with a reduced vulva, so there might be a non-human aspect to this gender concept anyway. So I just understand this as being a highly conceptual body type that I feel my own body should align with, even though it doesn't. At least, not fully, though it helps that I'm assigned female birth, because if I was assigned male birth, I'd probably have more dysmorphia or outright regular dysphoria about my body's gender appearance and sex. I feel fortunate that my main dysmorphia about it is having a large, normal for aged sapiens, vulva, rather than the reduced kind that various animals have, hair that I regularly shave to appear smoother in my armpits and on my legs, along with the appearance of my pubic hair, and possibly not feeling, quote, right about having nipples and areolas. Mostly areolas, I think. I might be okay with nipples themselves, kind of ambivalent about it. I therefore feel kind of bad to have believed that my gender was basically, quote, non-human, and have thought that for a few years at least, including taking part in post/discussions about having non-human gender types, only for it to turn out to be, quote, human, but another fictional concept of human, end quote. However, I understand that such is just part of introspection and learning more about myself, including through trial and error, so I'm not beating myself up about it really, just feeling kind of off about seemingly, not intentionally though, quote, misleading people about my gender. I do, though, believe my gender is still connected to or a part of my alterhumanity, not the other kin parts. Content warning. The following story contains mentions of body image and misogyny. Reclaiming Female Through Therianthrophy by Sarah B. Can you imagine the scent of the velvet fuzz of a newborn animal, the experience of a dark den now filled with new life, life that hasn't even opened its eyes yet to the winter world just outside? Can you imagine the tiredness, yet sheer love and comfort of having your children welcomed into the world, witnessed only by you and the earth's soil? It's something I often dream of, and it's that very experience that made me realize that I'm not transgender. It's funny, because in this community, it feels as though the majority of individuals here are transgender, and that experience ties closely into their non-humanity. For me, the opposite occurred. I had a top surgery letter in my hand after years of feeling not quite right in my body or in how people perceived me. I had every reason to feel this way and to want this, even if it felt imperfect. Looking back, I remember how I got to this point. Be skinnier any way you can. It'll make you prettier, they'd say as they, themselves, were ironically obese, and I loved them no less for it. Grow your hair long and change your clothes. You'll look more like a lady. A projection rooted in the ideals of someone who reads far too much Jane Austen. Women should be subservient and provide endlessly, or they're selfish. Dread set in every time I filled someone's coffee or plate of food due to expectation or demand. Every time the topic of how I looked in a dress or how my hair wasn't as long as someone else wanted. The disappointment of my family when they learned I dated other women in the past, and the relief when I dated one man. The eye rolls and my teacher's discouragement when I expressed an interest in physics or chemistry. Even my finance degree was achieved through apparent luck, despite graduating top of my class. Every right I accomplished was met with a wrong in some new category. The very things that made men impressive made me disobedient. I starved myself to look a little nicer to strangers, cried in bed after being talked down to at work, slept away all of my sorrows in a curled-up ball. Humanity didn't take kindly to me. It frustrated me, and combined with my general lack of identity at the time, along with diagnosed CPTSD, it was easy to relate to the plight that transgender individuals experienced. Surely that had to be me, but the label and being perceived as something else besides female never clicked entirely. I figured that I may just have mild gender dysphoria instead, but for the first time, I really dived deep into what it meant to identify as a gender, as everyone was needing urgent, permanent decisions to be made on my end. Around this time, I took on my first mammal label, which was feline. Ironically, cats are often the first animals to be associated with femininity and to be mistreated because of it. I wanted motherhood, but I wanted my own kittens to rear more than I felt like I wanted to raise a human infant after spending time in a daycare and at a cat shelter. I didn't want my breasts, but not because I wasn't a girl. That's just how other animals are. Perfume was a method to mark the rooms I had been in, not for elegance. I still felt so female, yet I didn't see another way out besides transitioning until it occurred to me. What if I didn't have to be a woman, and instead, I could simply be female the way animals are female? There were so many women like me, such as in Brave, Princess Mononoke, Poor Things, or Wolf Children. The women who strayed from polite society to walk their own paths and stuck to their own desires. Even my own cat was female, yet held her chin so high and demanded when she would or would not be held. This realization was the first time I found myself feeling feral freedom and uninhibited beauty in the ways I was. I was going to be the woman that rolls in the dirt, who is unapologetically beautiful in her own way, who chases after whatever her wild heart desires. I am not transgender, but I am not entirely a woman. I am an animal, and I am female in all of its unbridled ways. Shedding my domestic cat label, I have taken up the title of Bobcat. With it, I swear on my name that I will bite the hand of any who wish to tame or domesticate me ever again. I have been released out of the crate and back into the wilderness where I belong, and I shall never look back down the mountain. I feel the moss beneath my paws, the cold breeze kissing my nose, the smell of rain-soaked woods. Ravens cry as I run on 4 legs towards the peak, released at last from the grips of mankind. I feel the warmth of a life suddenly worth living, growing along with the hair I now reclaim as my own fur, without shame or expectation. I am home at the summit of my own world. My spirit runs wild, and she is female. Content warning. The following story contains mentions of surgery. Unsettle by Vievery. Once, for a second, I recreated my memory of flight. After multiple tries, floating several feet down in the backyard pool, my face to the crinkled plastic bottom, arms outstretched, I soared. My feet grappled for purchase as I scrambled upright and gasped, reaching the water's surface, and broke the fragile illusion, my wrongly bent limbs falling slack to my sides. When I lost my canine teeth to braces, a chip fell off my soul. They never offered to give me back the stolen teeth. I was too young to know I could ask for them back, or to know I could request this didn't happen, that they take any teeth other than those ones. Over a decade since, I run my tongue over the spot where they should be, seeking the sharpness erased from my mouth. I stopped trying to explain my gender years ago. It's too complicated to communicate to others. I hold it close to me, call it something vague, so I can avoid the exhausting conversations over and over and over and over and please stop asking me over again. I am a shapeshifter. I do not have only one gender. I do not have any gender. I am not only one species. I am not any species. I simply am. I slither, lengthened spine, and gangly limbs sprawled across rock outcroppings, yet I gallop, calloused paws and thick fur along my back. Yet I dive, wings pulled tight, tight, tight against my chest. Yet I breathe, somehow at peace with the body I exist in, human, but not quite. Genderfluidity, a mere poem, by Telu Telu. Matter changing, gender changing, pants to skirts, creeks to rivers, rain pouring down, ponytail released, rotating pronouns, tides turning genderfluidity, is turning tides, pronouns rotating, released ponytail, downpouring rain, rivers to creeks, skirts to pants, changing gender, changing matter. Bright by Professional Jaywalker, a fan piece of Runaway to the Stars by Jay Eaton. My masculinity is colorful, flashy, bright. I sport black clothes with vibrant color accents, dye my hair as a gesture of bird narcissism. I'm loud and hard to ignore. Avian brightness defined by the aliens of this sci-fi project have a similar brightness. Electric blue-yellow crests, fanciful clothes meant to catch the gaze as much as possible through their sheer loudness. Them and me, trans-bright individuals. I decided the rave-type subculture clothing might fit best this piece, as it's one of my most affirming styles. Be loud. Image description. A human figure holding talons and dancing with a raptor. Both creatures are largely black with pops of bright rainbows. The raptor has feathered gray wings, but is also covered in neon spots and sports a bright blue and yellow crest, fishnets on their neck, multiple earrings, and a single rainbow tail feather. Similarly, the human sports a crest of their own, as one side of their hair left long and dyed light pink, while their roots show brown. The human figure is wearing a black hoodie with a rainbow color wheel on the back, and the words Cyberdog, with each letter written in a different color of the rainbow. They are also wearing dark gray pants, black socks, and boots. A rainbow smiley face keychain dangles from their back pocket, and their socks are striped in neon pink. The anarchist symbol is visible on their boots. Behind the dancing figures is a faded blue shadow and blotches of cyan and yellow paint drops. But the shadow behind the human figure shows the long legs, tail, and wings of a roadrunner. End image description. Content warning. The following story contains intra-community respectability politics and extra sexism. We Are Monsters, and That Is a Joyous Thing, by the Dragonheart Collective. We suppose we are the bad kind of non-human. The kind that has dysphoria. The kind that wants to get body mods about it. The kind that calls themselves transspecies. The kind that leaks being transgender and non-human so deeply it's the same thing for many of us. Dysphoria is indistinguishable and intertwined. Half of us have genders that are heavily connected to our species identity, sometimes to the point that the species identity is the gender itself, rather than it just affecting presentation. Those of us who mean it for realsies ruin the argument that otherkin is not like being trans and isn't ever a gender. We are those in the community who are called disrespectful for being trans and otherkin and having that intersect. We are those who say non-human and mean it, teeth bared, not alternative human expression, but not human. Still, people, but unapologetically, loudly, proudly not human. This experience vilifies us on both ends. It makes us also the bad kind of transgender, the kind with contrasting identity labels and weird pronouns, the kind with weird genders, the kind that is the I do actually to the non-binary. They are going to identify as animals next, the kind that is the very monster conservatives fearmonger about, unrespectable and cringe. There's no space in the normie transgender community for us if we exist as we are, plural, trans species, queer, gender freaks, who don't identify as transmac or transfemme, and mean all of that for realsies. Discourse and community theory make no space for people like us, or when they do, it's lip service. If you cannot be sorted into girl non-binary or boy non-binary, you become unpalatable. If you claim delight in the removal of the human label, you become a threat for defanging what they consider a severe punishment meted out to those deemed evil. It requires digging to find the space that others like you lurk, other exiled monsters with strange genders and stranger interests. It's beautiful, really, how those of us so freakish, a term of honor and love now, band together and celebrate it. Other trans people, others in non-human identity, related and adjacent spaces, may turn their noses up at us for being the chink in the armor of their respectability politics-laden arguments, pleased to our oppressors, but we persist. For we are a bi-gender dragoness tomcat, and 3 animals with 3 different presentations of cat gender, and an AI facsimile of an anime girl with many more other non-binary folks under our, quote, singlet sona, presentation of genderqueer in the direction of a cat, and our expression of transness must take into account our species identity if it is to be authentic. And if that makes us problematic to the cis majority and the assimilationists, then so be it. We are monsters, and that is a joyous thing. My Gender is She-Wolf, by Earth Listener from the House of Chimeras. Image description. A 2-page comic drawn traditionally with colored pencils. Page 1. The first panel is completely gray and extends across the page. In the center it reads, My gender is... The next 2 panels are side by side, one pink and the other blue. Not a woman, written beside icons of lipstick, long hair, a dress, and high-heel shoe, and the women's bathroom symbol. Not a man, written beside icons of a suit, cap, mustache, tie, and the men's bathroom symbol. Another 2 panels side by side. The first one is purple and the other green. nor is it adjacent to either. Beside a figure that is split down the middle, one half the woman's bathroom symbol and the other the men's. There's also a combined Mars and Venus symbol, or even neutral, written beside an androgynous person with their arms and legs spread. The symbol beside them is a circle with a line through it. It's a separate, other gender. The final panel on the page is split between 3 squares, but extends across the length of the page. The background is of the Nonhuman Unity flag, and features a side view of a brown wolf walking with their head down. Page 2. The first 3 panels are side by side. Panel 1 shows a topless person hiding breasts behind their arms. Their face is blacked out. I once had dysphoria surrounding my chest. Panel 2. And while top surgery helped, the figure from before has had top surgery and is no longer hiding their chest. Their face is also still blocked out. Panel 3. It wasn't enough. The human figure is gone, and instead a close-up of a body of a brown-furred wolf standing on their hind legs is shown. The next 2 panels are side by side. I have dysphoria because I feel so hairless is written beside a pair of clean-shaved legs, but any amount more would still feel too mangy. Now the legs are covered in hair. The background of the following panel is a non-binary flag, because I would still have a human body. An androgynous, naked human form without genitalia is shown, because my gender is not human. The human figure is shown from behind, looking into a mirror that shows the reflection of a wolf. The final panel extends the length of the page, and its background is the Nonhuman Unity flag. My gender is she-wolf. A brown wolf is shown, laying down, with their head over their front legs. End image description. Coat of Gender by Nova. Image description. 2 leopards holding up a large, purple non-human symbol, a diamond inside of, and slightly overlapping a circle. The leopard on the right is a melanistic leopard. The diamond of the non-human symbol is split into fourths by alternating triangles of purple and white. Both of the white sections have purple sparkles in them, while the top purple section has an acorn, and the bottom a single feather. Right behind all of this is a circular coil of golden scales. Perched on top of the coils is a small brown raptor dinosaur with pink and purple feathers. At the bottom is a banner that reads, "She, they, and a many-headed dragon way." End image description. A code of gender is a visual way to describe gender identity inspired by traditional European heraldry. Our shield is the non-human symbol, surrounded by golden coils that are reminiscent of the scales of our Hydra self. This is because a lot of how we understand gender stems from being a non-human system of 5 dragons. We kept a nod to femininity with the choice in colors, muted purples, pinks, and golds, and that clever girl on the crest, but kept many of the other elements neutral. The acorn on it symbolizes resolve, luck, and strength of spirit, while the sparkles are meant to mimic the traditional ermine patterns from European heraldry in a minimalistic way that makes us happy. Also, the feather in the shield is a symbol that represents several of our headmates. The raptor on top represents survival and our headspace. Last, but not least, the leopard symbolize strength, duality, mystery, and personal power, and are in general a vibe for our code of gender. When Does Gender Make One Non-Human? By Dosky. Image description. A 3-page comic. Each of the pages features a full-body drawing of Dosky, an anthro black-scaled naga, gesturing towards the text or standing with their hand on their chest beside close-ups of depiction of their history. I've always known I was non-human, but as a youth, I didn't have the words for it. Being raised with and by humans, I was made to think I was an outlier, unique. A close-up of a black-scaled dinosaur maw filled with sharp teeth and blue gums. Identity age, 5 to 12. Unknown carnivorous mid-sized theropod dinosaur. As I aged, although I openly accepted what I was forced to mask my non-humanity by adults and the fear of mental institutions. A close-up of a large black cobra with blue gums and both hood and fang extended. Identity age, 11 to 18. Earth controller / protector deity. At the same time, I often verbalized, I am not a girl, or I wish I was a boy, since back then, non-binary wasn't widely known like it is today, especially to kids. This, thankfully, only labeled me as a tomboy at that day and age, but the message was the same. You're lying. Shut up and uphold the status quo, freak. The snake from the previous panel is now coiled up and trapped within a black sphere. All around them is a bright yellow light emitting from the outline of a Christian cross. Eventually, I myself buried every shred of what made me, deep into the darkest part of myself. Indoctrinated into the cult of Christianity, I tried to forcibly shape myself into their human mold, since openly being different only brought me pain. Thankfully, my indoctrination didn't last very long. It next helped bring me back to my senses, and gave me the environment I needed to unearth my non-humanness. They also introduced me to the concept of non-binary genders, being a gender themselves. Identity age, 20 to 23, angelic maned lioness chimera. A headshot of a maned lioness nervously looking over at a black and white cat that is angrily ranting with all their fur bristled. To be trans, someone needs to have dysphoria and go on HRT, ... Unfortunately, they were a transmed. Although it made me heavily question my gender, due to now knowing non-binary was even an option, it wasn't a safe place to actually explore it. A human figure is sitting on the couch, looking skeptically at the laptop in their lap. It wasn't until I got together with my now spouse, who was very supportive when I told him that I'm not straight, that I felt comfortable enough to begin to look into it. So look into it I did. I followed Tumblr blogs about non-binary and xenogender identities, and read countless websites. Eventually, I found a huge Google Doc of Mogai gender identities. There were several that fit my description of gender that cannot be understood by humans, but one in particular stood out. The next panel is a close-up of their laptop screen. Angel gender. A gender relating to godkin or angelkin, which is hard to describe to non-kin. To quote at Sophia Crocker, it's a gender that feels simultaneously soft, warm, and bright, as well as hard, cool, and dark. If I were to describe it using colors, it would ... Poof. Realizing these action words explode out of the thought bubbles around a close-up of Dosky's black cobra head, their eyes wide in astonishment. Wait, what's a godkin? The next panel shows a side-by-side of all their identities up to this point: the large theropod dinosaur, maned angelic lioness, and a naga cobra goddess. I'd finally found the missing piece of myself. So many questions and uncertainties fell into place upon seeing that one word, subsequently finding the community, and coming to truly understand my non-human nature. I wasn't a girl, at least not a human girl. I am a goddess. The large form of a coiling naga body is extended across a rushing river and is broken up over 3 panels. Uncomfortably participating in humans' culture surrounding women, not wanting to have offspring like a mammal, yet still having feelings around wanting to raise and nurture. All of it made much more sense when viewed through the lens of a goddess, especially a nature goddess such as myself. Never did I expect to be so comfortable in my own skin, knowing not just that I wasn't alone, but that all of my instincts had been correct. I wasn't crazy. I only hope that others who need to know this are able to find the community and get the closure that they may need as well. End image description. Graffiti Feathers by Raphael Snyder. Gender's a funny thing, 'cause it's pretty species dependent. I mean, of course, an animal probably doesn't usually have a powerful concept of gender. A dog doesn't feel gender in the same way most people do. But there's still something there, and it's different. What female looks like between humans, deer, hyenas, and snakes is completely unrecognizable from the view of one to the others, and that can be completely true of alterhumans like me, too. I'm an angel, not an ultrous, unknowable entity, not a messenger from some god, barely even a divine being, really, but a protector, a guardian angel, more or less. what looks like a human being with wings, but is so different as to be, gender-wise, unrecognizable. And yet, still, some part of me is human underneath. In source, I'm a vampire, once human, with a hell of an angel motif and identity. And I'm all three, really, human, vampire, and angel, and that's one hell of a setup for gender. Vampires often cling to the gender they had when they were human, at least for a while. A lot of them, though, eventually figure out that their gender isn't all it's cracked up to be, and either transition or shrug their shoulders and discard it altogether. I know a lot of vampires that consider themselves men because, historically, that's the gender that's had the most power in many human societies, and vampires love power. You think a guy who named himself Set after an Egyptian god has to be a man because he feels that way? Or is there a chance he's a man because that's what gives him the power to pull off whatever god-mimicking stunt he's pulling? Could be either. Could be both. But point is, with vampires, either's just as likely. I'm a younger vampire, only 50 or so, and only 20 years embraced, so my gender hasn't changed in the apathetic or utilitarian way. At least, not yet. No. Instead, the angel motif of my vampire clan, the Salubri, grabbed me by the throat and turned me into an archetypal guardian angel. Sure, I was queer before I got embraced, rocking the xenogender pronouns, even in the 80s, but a few labels ever sat right, and only when I figured out my angel things did I realize, I've never had a human gender to begin with. What I am is an angelic protector, and that's who I am, and who I've always been, on every intrinsic level. Hell, why not, you know? Even when I didn't realize how protective I was, even when I thought I was a mean son of a bitch that barely cared about anybody, I was growling at unfairness and snapping at cops, 'cause they were fucking with my people. I'm black, if that helps contextualize anything. I know what it's like being kicked down and mistreated. I'm trans, intersex, queer, and black, and yeah, alright, maybe inequality and treating people like shit sets me off. They always have. But I've had to learn how to channel that anger into something productive, not just yelling and squaring up, but something that can actually help and make a difference. Being black's an asset of it all too, I think, even if I don't have a firm grasp on that. A lot of human gender conversation in English-speaking spaces especially is crazy white, and maybe that's why I don't feel like I fit in either. Being black means being dehumanized all the fucking time, and fuck, fine. Maybe I'm not just human then. I'm not letting people take the label from me, but maybe there's more to it than that. Fine, let's play in that space. I guess I'm like a spray-painted angel up on a brick wall. I'm a hope and a prayer for protection, a watchful eye actually trying to help and heal, not oppress and beat people down like the goddamn cops do. I'm an angel, but an angel of the people, one quintessentially broke and southern and black. I'm not a pretty little white waif of an angel. I'm a big motherfucker with an attitude and a complex about saving and helping people a mile long. Is that species? Is that gender? I guess so on both counts. It's all ingrained in me, so I don't see much point in picking it apart. No human gender labels have ever sat nicely with me. I like trans and queer, but not non-binary. Even though it applies, it's a good label. Glad we've got it. Glad other people like it. But it sits on me like a hat that's too small. It suggests a humanity to me that I've gone beyond. And I don't mean beyond as in better. I mean beyond as in going further down one of many paths. My way isn't the right way, per se, but it's the right way for me. Do angels even have gender? I mean, God, what for, right? Maybe that's what's going on with me. Because what does a protector and healer need gender for? Granted, I'm not just an angel. I'm human and vampire too, and that complicates things. But maybe that's why any of this comes together. Maybe if I didn't identify as human in addition to everything else, I wouldn't think about it this so much. Maybe I would. I don't know. But I picked they, them pronouns because they felt so outside of anything else I knew at the time, a step beyond and in a wildly different direction. And that's the only thing that felt right. I named myself Raphael, unaware of the angel thing I'd picked up years later. And it feels like a stroke of cosmic or divine genius. Raphael, the archangel of healing, and I became the one kind of vampire that can heal, the one kind of vampire that most other vampires agreed were good to have around until we nearly got wiped out. And is Raphael a man per se? Why? Or is he something else, an angel entirely, and just takes the form of a man because that's what feels right, or what people expect of him? How similar would we be, and how different? Where do I fit in the host of angels that ascribe great religious meaning to their existence, whether that be Raphael, the archangel, or the dozens of angelkin and fictives I've spotted but more or less moved past because I ascribe such a different meaning to the name? Is this an essay? Is this a disorganized ramble? Is it me sorting myself out as I tell you about it, the 1,000th step on a path a million steps long? Maybe it's all of those. Maybe I'm still learning what my wings mean, and I want to feel understood, like I belong somewhere. Species and role and gender are all parts of our identities, and maybe for some people, those are easily separated, only overlapping in a few places, but not me. To me, every aspect of who I am is completely merged and intertwined with every other part, dots and sprays of paint on the wall, put there by someone kicked and angry but not broken, desperate for protection and to strike back in whatever way they can, making something beautiful along the way. I just hope I live up to that, because living ain't pretty, and I'm a lot more complex than a two-dimensional painting on a wall. Hic sunt dracones by N. Noel Sowell. Gender, in my species of dragon, is far more a melting pot of preferences and instincts than anything of singularly biological realities. Gender is not based on any of the many sexes that my species can come in. Instead, it revolves around complex courtship rituals, territorial instincts, and occasionally some other odds and ends. Gender is interwoven with sexuality in a way that is hard to explain, but which matters greatly to define it. There are dragons who court, and there are dragons who are courted. There are dragons who are settled into a single territory, with or without a partner, and there are dragons who are nomadic and still searching for their own land to claim. For me, these are the two axes upon which my species' gender is most often understood. It may very well be that gender, as humans understand it, is entirely the wrong way to conceptualize what I'm talking about in this civic essay, but is nonetheless the only terminology we have to define this meaningful way of understanding ourselves and interacting with others of our species. These are the dimensions that dragons of my kind relate to each other within, and which provide much needed subtext and context for an individual's actions or inactions towards another. While gender may not be the correct term to encapsulate the entirety of my meaning, to try and remove these factors from what I am discussing would be the same as playing just a song's chorus to an audience, without the verse or bridge to accompany it. It gives an incomplete image. Courtship. Dragon courtship is my species' complicated affair. Wooing the object of your affections is something that, if done lightly or in jest, may result in the suitor being driven off or killed, and potentially eaten, by the prospective mate. There are those who court, who initiate the courtship, continuously pebble at their potential mate, prove their worthiness through tricks of intelligence, skill, or strength. We'll refer to these as suitor dragons. And there are those who are courted, who judge the courtship with a clear eye, test the potential and truth of what their courter brings to the table, and are constantly challenging their potential mate. Or we'll refer to these as prospect dragons. It seems like an inane difference to make, but it's an important one nonetheless. Not all suitor dragons are interested in prospects, instead preferring other suitors, and similarly, not all prospect dragons are interested in suitors, instead preferring other prospects. Some dragons are interested in any other dragon regardless of courtship differences. Some are interested in other dragons, period. Some dragons may switch between the two over periods of time. These instincts may also change in intensity depending on age or based on the individual, as well as because of certain environmental factors such as territory, nesting capabilities, and pre-existing offspring. These differences don't map to masculine/feminine dichotomies and aren't reliant on the individual sex. These also do not completely map to any human roles during sexual activity, such as top/bottom/verse, either. Courtship is a complicated affair that can involve sexual activity and procreation, but which does not have to. The end goal of courtship is not eggs. The end goal of a courtship is a long-term partnership with mutual territory and treasure and, if all participating dragons are interested, potentially offspring. Courtship also does not have to be a monogamous affair. Multiple dragons may court a single dragon together or separately, and a dragon may have multiple partners who are wholly separated from one another, or who are also partners with each other. I would be considered a suitor dragon interested most often, though not always, in other suitor dragons in this explanation. Territory. In the same way girl and woman can be perceived to be different genders, so too can dragons with and without territory, and settled dragons versus nomadic dragons. Dragons who are without any kind of territory are sometimes young adults who have struck out on their own for a variety of purposes, although this category can also include old dragons who have abandoned or been driven out of their previous territory by a young upstart. It's rare for an older dragon to be successfully driven out of their territory due to the past experience and potential partners they may have alongside them, but it is not impossible. There are also some dragons who simply live more nomadic lifestyles and take up temporary territories, and those dragons who may temporarily leave their territories in hope of finding and courting a mate, usually to settle down with, but sometimes not. Referring back to the courtship categories of dragons, prospect dragons aren't typically going to fall into the category of being voluntarily nomadic due to how dangerous intrusions into other dragons' territories can be, though it's not wholly unheard of either. There are also dragons who settle into their territories and rarely, if ever, leave it. Some dragons may have smaller swatches of territory, while others may have larger. The size and variety of a dragon's territory can tell you much about them as a person. Some settled dragons may quite literally never leave their home, while others may visit the neighboring territories or take brief stints out to explore. A settled dragon will rarely leave their territory fully empty for long stretches of time. I am a dragon with territory of my own, which I rarely leave. I do not leave my territory in an attempt to court, although I do occasionally wind up with suitor dragons on my metaphorical doorstep because I am established. When I was younger, I did leave my territory for courtship attempts and exploration on occasion. My gender. You're a lesbian? I thought you were American. Translating my draconic gender into human gender is difficult to the point of impossible. On a fundamental level, my gender simply is dragon. Not gender as being dragon, but the nature of my gender is so draconic and alien to define that it simply makes the most logistic sense to simply call it dragon at the end of the day and be done with it in order to get my fundamental idea across. You could not take the draconity out of my gender any more than you could take the gender out of me. In the past, I've described myself as a xenogender fluid in an attempt to capture this. Xenogender to reference the non-humanity present overall, with a fluid suffix to both try and encapsulate the non-static axis of suitor/prospect and settled/nomadic present in my species, and to attempt to explain the differences in sex between me and the human body I find myself in. My species includes what are biologically referred to as simultaneous hermaphrodites, and I am one. This is not exceptionally unique or unusual. But we also have to remember that sexuality is a large building block in understanding draconic gender for my species, in almost a reverse of how gender is sometimes thought to be a building block in human sexuality preconceptions. I am a suitor for suitor, settled dragon, so this, in turn, affects how I interpret my species' gender through a human's lens. Perhaps additionally, because we spent so many years identifying as a lesbian when we were younger, I see myself and the ways I love as deeply sephoric, even in cases where the other person may not identify as a binary woman, or even may not identify as a woman at all. In more private spaces, I tend to label myself as both bisexual and as a lesbian separately. Bisexual is the label I tend to publicly share when I use something more civic than just queer, because it better conveys what I mean to describe in situations when I bring it up. In private, where people understand the intricacies regarding my non-humanity, they know that when I say lesbian and bisexual, I'm referencing these in wholly different dimensions than we normally attribute to either term. But in public, I'm just trying to convey to people in a human-centric society that I'm interested romantically in both men, women, and non-binary individuals. In a lot of ways, based on my feelings and the draconic understanding that underline how I'm trying to understand gender, you could say that my gender is Sephoric or lesbian. My systemate, Draco, feels similarly as a prospect for prospect settle dragon, but for the terms Achillean and gay. But, like I've already touched on before, we obviously can't label ourselves as such without needing a lengthy, personal, public explanation on it in the background, due to the disconnect between the human understanding of gender and what we're trying to use human gender terms to describe. The message we would convey would be so different from what we intend to say that it's not worth trying to publicly define it in these human terms. At a certain point, it's just easier to avoid public mention of gender entirely, or just default to the ever-present cop-out option for our complicated situation. My gender is dragon. Endel Reflection by Anonymous. Is my cat ears a delusion? Or is it my humanity? Is my seal connection make-believe? Or do I genuinely turn into a seal in water? As questions arise, I feel a sudden urge to groom myself, to itch at my rash-prone skin, to dive in the water and swim like the streamlined ringed seal. My mighty gained dominance as an orca feels forever real. The water and nighttime is my home. Human nature is forever unnatural to me, a forced way of being, one only granted to individuals lucky enough to not be oppressed or trapped in the shackles of cisnormavity. As I come to terms with all of me, my blackness, androgyny, queerness, fatness, disability, nonhumanness, amongst other things, I come closer to shattering myself out of that prison and living on my own terms. I don't owe anyone humanness. Not only am I non-human, but my non-humanness is also my gender. Thank you. We always knew we'd make another zine after Modern Draconity, but we didn't know we'd make one so soon. However, with the possibility of being able to release it in time for Pride Month, we couldn't resist, and this zine has turned out even bigger than the last. We can't wait to see what our next one will look like, but we definitely are going to take a break first, one that's not just a few weeks this time, lol. Thank you to everyone who submitted works. It means a lot to us that others think our project is valuable and are willing to use their time and ability to be a part of it. The community is so talented and varied, we hope this zine serves as a comfort for anyone who feels alone in their alterhuman and gender identities. May your claws stay sharp and your minds free. Nova.